What's going on, everybody? Hopefully you guys enjoy your weekend. It felt like a really long weekend, but in this video we're going to look at Bitcoin and a pattern that it just broke out of. There's actually an article covering it, so that's pretty cool, but it's a pattern we've been watching for at least the last couple of days. We're going to talk about that, where Bitcoin might go ahead of the halving. We're also going to look at BitDigital's mining update. I told you guys to look out for it. I didn't heed my own advice and I totally missed it. It came out a couple of days ago, but we're going to go over it. We're also going to look at BitDigital on the chart as well as CleanSpark. Currently, CleanSpark sitting at a very important support zone. If it breaks it, we may see more pain. We have under 10 trading days before the halving. Right around 10 trading days. And in my opinion, we're looking at some of the last buying opportunities for these Bitcoin miners. I do expect shortly after halving they will rally. Let's go over a couple of things here. If you guys like this content, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and let's get started. And we have Bitcoin. It just broke out of this pattern here. We had a nice run all the way nearly to 73,000. Now we're cooling back down a little bit, but where we stand right now, we are under 3% from breaking all-time high. In reality, Bitcoin doesn't have to move much to break to a new all-time high, to a new price we haven't seen yet for Bitcoin. This is exciting. We're near all-time highs again, and we're coming up so close to the halving. Now, there's an article talking about this pattern and how it might cause a run to 80,000. And you guys might remember quite a while ago, I had a price target for Bitcoin in August to get to 80,000. This was before all the ETF hype, and it seems obvious now that I was a little bit too conservative in my prediction. But let's go over Bitcoin price predictions in just a little while, and let's see what this article says about this pattern breakout. And like always, all articles I go over will be down below for you in the description, along with some stocks and cryptos if you're interested. Bitcoin may rally to 80,000 on a triangle break that it just did. And as said by 10x Research, the firm that's basically talking about this pattern, if the breakout is bullish, which we suspect, we already saw the bullish breakout, so there's the spoiler for you, Bitcoin could climb above 80,000 during the next few weeks, if not earlier. Buying at 69,280 and setting a stop at 65,000 appears appropriate. And here it is on their chart, and they say the upside target of 80,000 equates to at least 10% rise from the current price of 72,300. But that's basically all that is mentioned in this article. To me, that's relevant. There is a couple other little paragraphs and stuff. Feel free to read it. It is in the description down below. But I'd say it's very possible, very likely even, that Bitcoin can hit 80,000 by the halving, if not very briefly after. A 10% move for Bitcoin is child's play. We recently got out of a 15% down correction. I think one catalyst that could lead to a further price movement this week is obviously what kind of data we get for the spot Bitcoin ETFs today. I'll be keeping an eye out on that. Once we get any data from that, I will put it in my Discord, and I'll probably be doing a video tomorrow covering it. I do think Monday will set the tone in terms of the spot Bitcoin ETFs. If we see net inflows, the market will obviously see that as positive. If we see net outflows, which I don't really expect, well, that might cause a little further pain this week. That might set kind of a negative tone in the beginning of the week. But to me, overall, until the halving, we will see net inflows. We will see Grayscale have a smaller and smaller effect on the market as their funds get smaller and smaller versus BlackRock, whose funds get larger and larger. Soon they will eclipse, and I do think this is coming before the halving. This could be another positive catalyst ahead of the halving that causes a further rally. Next up, let's talk about a price prediction. We have some that are just outlandish, possibly outrageous, but we have one from Anthony Scaramucci, and I think it's pretty on point. And Anthony Scaramucci predicts $150,000 Bitcoin this cycle. I personally think that's pretty reasonable. It might not be extremely conservative, it might not be extremely bullish, but I think it's kind of middle of the road. I think it's somewhat safe to expect somewhere around $150,000 Bitcoin by the end of this cycle, probably by early 2025, maybe mid 2025. But in reality, we'll have to get through more of this cycle to kind of get an idea. The more we get through this, the more likely we'll have a better educated guess on where we will be at the peak. For instance, if 6 months from now, Bitcoin's already getting towards 200,000, well, we might want to raise our price targets by the peak. If Bitcoin happens to be weak and we haven't even broke 80,000 by summer, well, we might want to lower our price targets just a little bit. Another thing to realize is, as Bitcoin's price increases, it takes a considerable amount more money to take Bitcoin off of supply. You can buy a lot more Bitcoin if Bitcoin's only 50,000 versus if Bitcoin's 200,000, for example. You can buy 4 times the amount of Bitcoin. And that's one thing to think about is once the price gets higher and higher, it is going to be harder and harder to push that price even higher. But that's a discussion for down the road, more towards when we look topish. We are still in the middle point of the cycle in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think. Where do you think Bitcoin's going to top out at? I honestly think 150,000 is pretty reasonable. Next up, let's look at BitDigital's mining update. This dropped a few days ago. Now in March, BitDigital produced 136.4 Bitcoin, which is a 6% increase compared to the month prior. Their active hash rate is approximately 2.76 exahash as of the end of March. Now before you say this hash rate is so small, we have companies like CleanSpark with, a 16 exahash. Keep in mind, BitDigital is like a $250 million company. CleanSpark is about 16 times the market cap and about double the hash rate, so keep that in mind. But CleanSpark is profitable, whereas BitDigital is not yet. But we're going to cover that in just a second, and where we might see BitDigital in the upcoming earnings. But continuing on, treasury holdings of Bitcoin and ETH were 956 Bitcoin and 16,032 ETH, with a fair market value of approximately 68 million in Bitcoin and 58 million in ETH. And their Bitcoin equivalent, so this is looking at all of their digital assets and saying if this was all Bitcoin, their Bitcoin equivalent holdings would be approximately 127 million in Bitcoin. And this is pretty interesting, the amount of Bitcoin holdings they have amounts to half of their market cap. I don't know of many other miners that have that feature. The company had cash and cash equivalents of nearly 35 million. Now here's something for ETH. We did see a decrease with their ETH staking, but this was due to the company changing their provider for native staking. There might have been an off period as they were transitioning that might have contributed to it, but they didn't really give us much detail on that. Now, BitDigital earned a blended annual percentage yield of approximately 2.8% on its staked ETH. The company earned aggregate staking rewards of approximately 29 Ethereum during March 2024. Now their AI update. They currently have 251 servers actively generating revenue from their BitDigital AI contract. They earned an estimated 4.3 million from this contract during the month of March 2024. Now I want to remind you, before this mining update came out, they gave an update on their AI, and there is an additional proposal here, an additional 2,048 GPUs, which basically doubles their number. So theoretically, that 4 million per month should come up to 8 million per month, just doing simple math. There might be other dynamics involved, obviously, but that's just from a simple base understanding. We should see somewhere around double the revenue, which would set them right around that 100 million annual run rate. It would be like 96 million if you're looking at 8 million per month. So it'll be very close to this 100 million annualized revenue run rate goal once they get these GPUs up and running. From BitDigital's recent peak that was back in like February, we are still down almost 60%, down about 55%. These are the opportunities to be buying the Bitcoin miners ahead of the halving. When there's fear, when everyone's saying the miners are going to get half the rewards, they're definitely going to tank after the halving. The market is forward looking. If you think the halving isn't somewhat priced in, then I got a bridge to sell you. The reality is no one knows for sure if the halving is completely priced in, partly priced in. We can only go off of our best judgment. My best judgment tells me that the halving is for the most part priced in. Do we see a little more pain in anticipation of the halving? Do we see a little more pain maybe in the week, 2 weeks after the halving? Perhaps. But here's something I am pretty certain of. I guess you can't be 100% certain. I would like to say 100%, but you never know. Here's something I would and I am betting money on, is these Bitcoin miners are going to be much higher in price by the end of 2024. When you look back, buying during this fear of the halving, cutting rewards, this will be a buying opportunity when you look back. This may be one of the last buying opportunities when you look back. And to me, the Bitcoin miners are probably only a good buy for the next 3 months or so, with this being the best opportunity. I do expect 3 months from now, the Bitcoin miners will be higher in price. They will probably still be a good buy, but the gains will be diminished by then. And 6 months from now, a year from now, it might be good to avoid the miners. It might be profit-taking season. I'm not going to be 100% bullish on these Bitcoin miners at all times. I am following the Bitcoin 4-year cycle, and the Bitcoin cycle says we're still in the middle point of the bull rally. And here's something that's extremely exciting. I've mentioned this to you guys before, but look at what BitDigital is expecting. They're expecting a profit in the upcoming earnings. They're expecting a $27 million in revenue, which is about double what they reported. Last quarter, they reported a loss. Here's something to think about. Let me zoom out on Bitcoin so you see a little context here. So this is the quarter that we got so far when the miners reported earnings. It was October, November, December, the last quarter of 2023. Bitcoin's price range was basically 28,000 to about 44,000 or so throughout that quarter. Basically, the average price was right around 35,000. some of the miners, CleanSpark, Cypher, they reported profitability during this quarter when Bitcoin was at an average price of 35,000. In the upcoming quarter, these miners are going to be reporting. Bitcoin was basically in the range of 40,000. Admittedly, it dipped very briefly down to like 39, 38. But it's basically around 40,000 all the way up to about 74, 75,000. I would say the average price of Bitcoin during this quarter was about 55,000. And maybe the average price of Bitcoin in the next quarter, which will be after the halving, April, May, and June, maybe Bitcoin's average price during that point is 75,000 or so, maybe higher. So basically, even with the halving cutting rewards in half, Bitcoin being at the price it is currently is the equivalent of Bitcoin being at that $35,000 area roughly, where some of the miners were posting profitability. And in terms of the 4-year cycle, you're seeing Bitcoin creating new all-time highs. It is now past its previous peaks. I would say, comparing this cycle to last cycle, we're probably at the equivalent of like a $20,000, maybe $30,000 Bitcoin. In my opinion, we easily have a double from here for Bitcoin. So will the halving really hurt these miners when Bitcoin's price will appreciate so dramatically? Maybe briefly the halving will hurt these miners as Bitcoin takes time to appreciate in value over the rest of this year. But the reality is, even with the halving in effect, if Bitcoin's still at a $75,000 Bitcoin, well, that's like the equivalent of Bitcoin being 35,000 pre-halving. And like I said, there were miners posting profitability and many were close to profitability. So hopefully you guys get the message I'm trying to convey. We're still this early in the cycle and Bitcoin's price right now is the equivalent of Bitcoin being 35-ish thousand before the halving takes effect. And to me, it's kind of obvious that a lot of these Bitcoin miners will be deep in the profits. But let me know if you think I'm wrong. Now, I gotta mention CleanSpark, and one thing that I noticed last night, I was up late enough to see the pre-market. We started seeing the miners absolutely rip pre-market because Bitcoin was breaking out of that triangle pattern. But it turned out to be a liquidity grab, and we are basically flat for the day, if not slightly red, which some of you might be looking at and be happy about. The only reason you should want any stock to be up massively is if you're already fully built out on it. If you want to buy more shares, why would you want CleanSpark to continue rallying? Why wouldn't you want CleanSpark to pull back more towards your cost basis perhaps? Or at least pull back and give you some good discounts. We are now at an important zone for CleanSpark back towards this 15. If we do break this 15, we're going to test 14. I still find it very unlikely that we're going to fill in this gap. I've told you guys before why I think we're not going to fill this gap and why it would be a buying opportunity to buy into the attempt of a gap fill. But for those of you that haven't heard it, this was a breakaway gap, a gap on huge volume, a gap on a profitable quarter. These gaps are less likely to fill than a common gap, but still possible. I'm inclined to think that it won't fill, and buying up to the gap fill would be the way to go, otherwise you're probably going to miss it. But I could always be wrong. Now, CleanSpark, expecting another profitable quarter. I definitely expect that as well. They posted a profit back when Bitcoin was at that $35,000 average price. I expect them to post a profit again. This quarter is based on January, February, March when Bitcoin was at around a $55,000 average price. They're expecting some huge revenue growth. They're expecting nearly $107 million for revenue. Last quarter, they saw about 73 million. This is more than a 25% revenue growth. That's a pretty big increase in revenue. Even with that, I expect them to beat these estimates. These estimates were given back when they reported their last earnings. And this was in early February. In early February, Bitcoin was at about $50,000. It didn't even have its rally to 60,000. It didn't even have its rally to 70,000 yet. The estimates were given when Bitcoin was at a $50,000 price. They probably thought there would be some price appreciation, but they probably also anticipated some potential decrease. They might have just said, okay, at an average $50,000 Bitcoin, this is what we expect for revenue. I do expect them to beat this revenue estimate. The big thing though is, are they going to see another profitable quarter? 2 profitable quarters in a row before the halving. And believe it or not, I expect CleanSpark to post profitability after the halving takes effect. And I'm not just saying that because their upcoming earnings is after the halving. I mean the upcoming earnings after this earnings. I expect to be profitable. Maybe not the next one, but future ones, yes. And like I said, CleanSpark posted a profitable quarter when Bitcoin was at a $35,000 average price. After the halving, it would stand to reason that if these miners are taking half the rewards, as long as Bitcoin's up to 70,000 or above, it basically negates the effect of the halving taking half the rewards. It's basically the equivalent of Bitcoin being 35,000 pre-halving. And we saw that CleanSpark posted a profit when Bitcoin was at an average $35,000 price. Let me stop rambling on and remind you guys that the halving is so close. We are under 2 weeks away. We're probably looking at like 9 more trading days left. So if these miners are gonna see pain, they need to do it and soon. It is my opinion that these miners are going to rally soon after the halving. Maybe not the first week, maybe not the first couple days, but I do expect soon after the halving these miners will rally. Once this negative catalyst is past us, I put air quotes because I believe it's a positive catalyst, but currently it's obviously negative. The big picture is positive. These miners are going to be deep in the profits. If you don't think these miners are going to demand higher valuations when they're much more profitable, when they're actually making profits, we only have a few miners that are posting profits right now. But, when we get into the peak of the cycle, when we get into, late 2024, early 2025, and a lot of these miners are posting profits, they are going to demand a higher valuation. And compared to last cycle, a lot of these miners are going to be posting profits that didn't post profits last cycle. I do expect we're going to have a lot of fun with these Bitcoin miners over the next year and a half maybe. And now is the time to take advantage. Now is the time to buy the uncertainty, the fear. You don't want to be buying when these are ripping and rallying. You don't want to be buying when these are extremely overbought. You don't want to be buying when everyone's saying to buy these Bitcoin miners. You want to be buying when everyone's saying they think they're going to keep dropping. You want to be buying when everyone's saying, I'm going to wait for that $10 gap fill. Be too patient and you're going to miss this ride. But thanks as always for watching, guys. Let me know what you're looking at in the market here. Are there any Bitcoin mining updates that I missed? Let me know about them down below in the comments. What's your all-time top Bitcoin miner? Let me know down below. Thanks as always for watching, guys. Also, where do you think Bitcoin's going at the peak? Where will Bitcoin be at the peak? I think 6 figures is in the bag. 200,000, I don't know. 150 to me is pretty reasonable. 100,000 to me is child's play. We're definitely going to see it, and it is going to be a very, very exciting year. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.